Welcome to the channel, everybody, and in today's video, it's clear by the title, the Lone Star rivalry is alive and well. As many of y'all don't know, and it's been about 10 years since they've last played on the football field. If you don't live in the state of Texas, you don't understand how deep this rivalry goes between Texas A&M and Texas. These two schools hate each other. I mean, I would compare it to the level of Oklahoma and Texas, and that rivalry has blossomed over the past 10 years as Texas A&M and Texas haven't played each other on the football field. They've had some slates in other sports, but nothing like the football field. Texas loves football. It's just what we do here. I mean, we have high school stadiums the size of some mid-major colleges. This is ridiculous around here, but it's just what the South does. And what I'm here to talk about is what 2022 means for this rivalry and how important this year is, specifically for the future years as Texas is officially joining the SEC, as I made plenty of videos on how I think Texas will bounce back and how I think Texas is not as prepared to go into the SEC as their counterpart in Oklahoma. They're still going to have to match up with Texas A&M in the SEC on a consistent basis, which means recruiting battles and things of that nature, and the game itself is massive to all respective parts of the program. We don't realize that, yes, there's going to be a lot of guys that commit in the 23 recruiting class in this coming year throughout leading up into the preseason and the regular season and then the playoffs right before National Signing Day actually occurs. But the winning on the field can influence a recruit's decision by large margins. I mean, we saw Texas A&M beat Alabama, and all of a sudden in a couple weeks they get Walter Nolan, ESPN's #1 player in their entire database. I mean, wins like that and having the opportunity to face against the best of the best in the SEC, things like that can, I mean, you get the #1 recruiting class of all time if you're Texas A&M. Not to mention, Texas still has a massive brand. They got the #5 recruiting class and the #1 quarterback of the 2022 class, who was originally at Ohio State. He had transferred into the 2021 class, but now that he's transferring out of Ohio State, they kind of reclassified him into 2022. If you want to say Cade Klubnik or Connor Wigman or any Drew Aller, any of these guys are the #1 quarterback for the 2022 class, I wouldn't blame you. But Quinn Ewers, if you want to count him into that class, he is the #1 guy. He's the #1 quarterback. He was a 1.0 rating. Not to mention the last 1.0 quarterback to go to Texas was Vince Young, so that gives you an idea of how good this kid can be and really what the standards are set for him. I know a lot of Texas fans are going to try to bring back down the expectations of what to expect from him, but I mean, when your most recent 1.0 recruit was Vince Young, you're probably one of the best players in Texas football history. I mean, the standards are going to be set. But what is so important about these two respective programs when it comes to this year is they have very similar opponents, and not to mention this 23 recruiting cycle and probably this recent cycle could end up facing each other head to head in the SEC. We're finally going to be able to see players that could face off against each other in a massive rivalry, which means a lot of back and forth and a lot of slights are going to be between these two programs when it comes to recruiting. We even saw it with Quinn Ewers. Texas A&M was never in the running for Quinn Ewers, and I am 90% sure he put that name, or reports put that name on, to make it seem like it was an advantage above Texas, like this recruit picked Texas over Texas A&M. It's little things like that that happen in college football. We are in the wild, wild west. I mean, transfer portal, everything else like that in college football, it's insanity. There's no way around it. It is absolute insanity of what's going on, and little things like that. I mean, go look at Auburn. Go look at what's going on in Auburn right now with their own head coach, who they are keeping, actually. You'll see an example of what boosters will do to get a certain team or player or coach out of there. They'll do anything. And even with recruiting battles, little things like that, like a #1 player picking another school, even if the other school wasn't even truly in the running, as they had Connor Wigman already ready to sign. Things like that can affect the recruits and things like that. But the biggest thing with this year, like I said, was the similar opponents. And it's rare that they both get opponents that they play that are at a high level and they get almost like a litmus test between the two. I've said it in previous videos. Alabama versus Texas and Texas A&M versus Alabama are two big matchups for Alabama to have a much tougher non-conference schedule and to still have to get through the SEC. But Texas will also get them at home with a brand new offense. They have a lot of ties. Jahlil Billingsley is a former Crimson Tide that goes to Texas, not to mention Sarkisian. Many other similarities going on right there. Even Kamar Wheaton is rumored to potentially go to Texas. There's a lot of different things, and they've gone head-to-head in the recruiting battles. But this year specifically, with as much talent in the 2023 recruiting class being in Texas, like David Hicks and things of that nature, I would like to say I'm not 100% sure if David Hicks is from Texas. I'm going to double check that, but if I'm wrong, there's a lot of talent. It's clear. In Texas, there's a ton of talent this year, specifically at the skill positions. Last year, it was much more defensive line heavy, but this year it's very much skill position based. A lot of good running backs and wide receivers are coming out of Texas this year. How well these two teams perform on the field, I mean, clearly it's not a huge difference, but as we get closer to Texas joining the SEC, things like that is going to be weighed a lot more heavily in a recruit's mind. They're not only facing against Oklahoma and things like that, and Baylor and TCU, now they're having to face Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, all these different SEC teams. I mean, it's clear that the SEC is bigger and better than the Big 12. So a recruit's going to be comparing a lot more heavy things, and I take each recruit's mindset very uniquely. I mean, I'm not going to just generalize everything about it, but I'm gonna say how well these two teams perform, specifically with Texas A&M. We'll go through their expectations this year. A lot of people are expecting them to at least make the playoff in the next 2 years. Specifically, a lot of people think this year they have to make it with the recruiting class that they brought in. The standards are set. Texas A&M has been trying their best to not be a team that is always punching up. In the sense, they're trying to always punch down now. They're trying to be the team to beat instead of trying to beat the teams that are at the very top. They're trying to be the #1 team. Not to mention, Texas had a very bad year last year. Losing to Kansas, I mean, I love the jokes. I get them all the time. But not to mention, they were 5-7. You lose to Kansas, but you're also 5-7. You don't make a bowl game in a weaker conference. A lot of expectations are just do a little bit better this year. I have a little bit more just because they have so much talent on the roster, and Sarkisian is bringing in his first class, and yet they still got the #5 class and a really good offensive line, which is going to be very helpful in the Big 12 with some of the pass rushers that have been developing. As well as you have Oklahoma, who has taken a step back from the Lincoln Riley years. Texas has every opportunity to win the Big 12 this year, and they can't disappoint. Texas A&M is also expected to potentially win the SEC. They can't disappoint. So it's going to be a big time head-to-head matchup without even being on the field on who can perform better, and if both end up disappointing, you'll have teams like Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama. They're easily capable to go into Texas and take these recruits. I mean, if Texas and Texas A&M want to be the top guys, not only in their state, but in the country, they're going to have to be able to grab the guys in their own state, which was becoming a big problem in the mid-2010s, as Texas A&M was able to get some, but Texas was really struggling to recruit at times until the later half of the years when they had so much talent, but they weren't performing on the field. And I would also like to give credit to U of H, TCU, Baylor. I mean, Baylor won the Big 12. I do not want to discredit Baylor in all of this. If you're a Baylor fan, I mean, there's an argument to be said that you are the best team in Texas right now, just based off of you being able to produce on the field with Dave Miranda, who I love as a head coach. But I'll tell you what, if there's one thing that I'm excited about the most in the next coming years, is this rivalry coming back. I grew up on this rivalry. It was Thanksgiving. The battle between Texas and Texas A&M was always a massive event. It was one of the best things in the world. And ever since Justin Tucker beat Texas A&M on that game-winning field goal, I mean, it's just been talk and talk, and it's time to put it on the field. I've been begging for this game to come back. And this year specifically, I think is going to be the biggest year between these two programs. And who is more prepared to go into this head-to-head matchup in 2024? If you're at this point of the video, please like and subscribe. I just wanted to do a quick preview between these two schools and what to expect moving forward and the recruiting battles that is going to happen this year. Who do you expect to be more ahead in the next coming years, and who do you think will win in a head-to-head matchup if they played this year? Let me know down in the comments below, and have a wonderful day.